Hello everyone, welcome to the wood shop. Before we do any work, we need to make sure that we are safe. Always wear safety glasses, hearing protection if necessary, remove jewelry, tie back long hair, tuck in loose clothing, and always wear closed-toed shoes. Welcome to the disc sander safety video. This here is the disc sander, and it's got a 12-inch disc on it. It rotates in the clockwise direction. So what that means is we can only sand on one half of this machine. If we sand on the left-hand half of this machine, when it's spinning really, really fast, we run the risk of losing control of our piece of wood and this flying across the shop and possibly even getting our fingers into the abrasive. So you only sand on the right-hand side so that all the forces are going downward into the table which supports your cut. With the disc sander, we're mostly doing outside profiles, like if we're going to round over this corner, or sanding flat things, like sanding the end of this. We have a miter gauge attached here so that we can sand square to the surface this way, but we also don't want to assume that our disc is perfectly square this way. We want to check that because we can actually tilt this table. This table will tilt little bits. There it is. We can tilt this table down at multiple angles to achieve different results and get different cuts. But most times we are working at 90 degrees. So if you're unsure, make sure you check the angle of the table to the angle of the disc. Damn it. Always check the abrasive to make sure there's no damage to it. So if there are tears or chunks missing from the abrasive, the disc needs to be replaced, and it should not be used because this spins at very, very high RPM, and if a piece of that came off or the entire disc came off, it could really do some damage. So make sure you check it over before you use it and make sure there's no damage. So keep your fingers about 2 inches away from the abrasive, otherwise you run the risk of getting your fingers buzzed by the abrasive, and that doesn't feel very good. It's very, very rough. It's about 50 grit sandpaper, and it does pretty quick work of a piece of wood, and it will take away your skin even faster. Okay? So here it is spinning full speed, and if we're going to sand this profile, we are going to keep the project work moving so that we don't burn the abrasive or burn the piece of wood. So that stayed on there for a little bit too long, generates a bit too much heat. So let's also get this out of the way. So also this machine does a pretty rough job. It's not the smoothest because it's pretty rough sandpaper, so I probably want to keep my line, and I'll hand sand down to that after. Before you walk away from the machine, always make sure it's stopped so that nobody else is at risk of injury when you walk away from the machine. You're always supposed to be in control of the machine, and it should not be posing a hazard to anybody when you leave. So also isolate the power at the switch for the next person so they are safe. If you plan on making special operations where you're changing the angle of the table or something that's out of the ordinary, make sure you come in contact me and let me know what you're doing so that I can help you with the setup and put safety guards in place, and we can talk about where the forces and things are. Because we don't want to, for instance, you can't sand up here in the air, because there's nothing supporting your piece of wood, you're going to lose control, or it can slam down against the table and pinch your fingers. You could throw it out of your hands and you could get your fingers into the abrasive. And we don't want any of those things to happen. So always keep your workpiece in firm contact with the table and standing only on the right-hand side, as a reminder. Here we are at the belt sander. This is a large horizontal belt sander, and the belt moves in this direction, which means when we're sanding our piece of wood, we're going to be opposing that force in the opposite direction. We don't want to hold the piece of wood on the abrasive for too long, because that generates heat and it tends to burn, as you see here from the disc sander. So we want to give it time to cool down, and we're going to sand it in small increments as I'm showing you here. Before we get going, we want to check the abrasive for damage. It's a good idea to make sure there are no tears or holes or anything, especially in the junction area of the belt right here. So this one looks pretty good. The table is adjustable for angle as well as for height. If we end up burning part of the sandpaper, we can move the table up to expose fresh paper. So we don't want to assume that this is 90 degrees, so we're going to check it with a square before we get going. And really what this machine is doing for us is helping us to maybe remove a little bit of material and create a flat surface on small projects that don't require large equipment. Maybe even pieces that are too small to fit through the jointer. We might try and flatten them on the belt sander, or even with a hand plane. So I'm going to show you what it's like sanding on the belt sander, and here we go. So it does a pretty nice job of sanding things fairly flat, but I wouldn't rely on this for very high quality flat surfaces where I'm looking to use the stock breakout process or do any kind of accurate joinery. This machine really isn't that accurate for things like that, but it can remove some decent amount of material and create a fairly flat surface for you in order to move further on small projects. Once again, making sure the machine is fully stopped before you walk away, and only one person working on this machine at a time. It looks like it's large enough for 2 people to work on this machine at once, but for safety reasons, only one person on a machine at a time. That goes for all machines, and because you don't know what somebody else is going to do. They might be putting you at risk while you're also running a machine, and you don't want to put yourself at that risk. Okay? Thank you for watching. Disc sander and belt sander safety, and we'll see you next time.